So I still want to have a function which I can call to connect, and therefore this function still is looking good to me in general. One thing I want to do is I'll add a throw error here, so that I also throw the error again when we fail here. But besides that, I'm happy with having Mongo Connect here. But I'll change something. I'll not return the client in my callback here. Instead, I'll add a variable, _db. The underscore is only here to signal that this will only be used internally in this file, but you don't have to name it like this. You could also have normally just a db. And initially, this will be undefined. Now here, in the then block, I will store a value in there. I will store access to the database here. And if I leave it like this, what we will do is we will connect to the test database by default, because that is what we specify here in our connection string. So we'll connect to shop here, and then this will give us access to the shop database to which we automatically connect. And you could also enter the database name here to override this and connect to a different database than you were connected to initially, but I'll not enter anything and just connect to that database. As a side note, unlike in SQL, we never need to create that database or the tables, the collections in there ahead of time. It will be created on the fly when we first access it, which is again fitting that flexibility theme MongoDB gives us. In SQL, we had to prepare everything in advance, at least when not using SQLize, which also had to do that, but it did it for us. Here, we don't need to do anything. We're just telling MongoDB, hey, connect me to the shop database. And if that database doesn't exist yet, MongoDB will create it as soon as we start writing data to it. So that's just a little side note. Here, I do store a connection to my database in the DB variable. And with that stored, now in my callback, I don't need to return it, but I will add another function here. I'll name that getDB. And here, I will simply check if DB is set, so if it's not undefined. And in this case, I'll return DB, so I will return access to my database. Otherwise, I'll essentially not do anything here. So I'll return undefined. We could also throw an error, no database found, something like this. Now here, I also want to export that, so I'll not just export Mongo Connect, but instead I'll just use a different syntax you learned about, exports Mongo Connect equals Mongo Connect, and I'll also have exports getDB, which equals getDB, like this. So now I'm exporting two methods, one for connecting and then storing the connection to the database, and therefore this will keep on running. And I have one method where I return access to that connected database, if it exists. And MongoDB behind the scenes will even manage this very elegantly with something called connection pooling, where MongoDB will make sure it provides sufficient connections for multiple simultaneous interactions with the database. So this is really a good pattern we should follow. Now, with that changed, we still can connect. One thing I need to adjust though is in the app.js file, where I do connect, I'll not get the client anymore because we don't return it in the callback anymore. So now we just know we are connected, but there's nothing else we can do. But one thing I will be able to do is in product.js, where I create my product model, there I don't just can connect the connection now, but I can import getDB. And that, of course, is very useful because that means I do import this by accessing getDB here, because this means that I now can call this function to get access to my database, and therefore I can use it to, well, interact with the database. Now let's use that database connection starting in the next lecture.